Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, my name is William McNary, and I'm the co-director of Citizen Action Illinois. And I'm proud to stand here with the chair of the Senate's Financial Institutions Committee, Senator Jackie Collins, and these fine religious leaders to oppose the predatory practices of the pawnbroker industry here in Illinois, which currently charge up to 240% interest. Usury, making immoral, unjust loans that fairly enrich the lender. Usury, taking advantage of one's misfortune with excessive and abusive interest rates. Usury, making a profit from a poor person by exploitation. Usury, loan sharking. The Predatory Loan Prevention Act of 2021 capped interest rate loans at 36%, thus ending an era of predatory payday loans. But there are still some predatory loan sharks in the consumer lending waters here in Illinois, and they are the pawnbrokers. The pawnbrokers make their living by draining people who are struggling. The average payday loan before the 30% interest rate cap was 297%. The average pawnbroker loan today is 240%. Capping the current interest rates at 36% means more money into consumers' pockets and less money into pawnbrokers' pockets. Putting that money in consumer pockets means more spending and more saving and more investing. That's not only good for the consumers, but also good for the community and the local economy. It creates jobs and reduces the need for emergency cash. The Predatory Loan Prevention Act of 36% is working. The pawnbrokers have been evading it for over 1.5 years, so it's time, past time, we close the pawnbroker loophole once and for all. For nearly 30 years, Citizen Action Illinois has been a part of the Monsignor Jack Egan Payday Loan Coalition against predatory lending. This coalition was named after that great religious leader for racial and social justice, and his last economic fight was the fight against predatory usury loans. And for all of those 20 years, Senator Jackie Collins was our champion and helped to lead the charge on behalf of consumers. And so I am proud to welcome the chair of the Senate Financial Institution Committee, Senator Jackie Collins.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
We're here today to make not only a moral argument, but also an economic argument. And as you can see behind me, and we're going to introduce the gathering behind me, this is an interdenominational issue. So we have representatives of all the various religious groups behind me. This is my last holiday season as a state senator. And looking back, it is both remarkable and sad how often I have had predatory lending on my mind at this time of year. For nearly 20 years, we've been hearing predatory lenders talk about how consumers need them, how capping interest rates will cause credit to disappear, and no one else but them can help the consumer. We're here today to call upon people of faith, including my colleagues in the legislature, to defend the state's 36% rate cap. The cap, known as the Predatory Loan Prevention Act, or PLPA, was a cornerstone of the Legislative Black Caucus's Economic Access Pillar, which was unveiled in 2020 in response to major events that cast a bright light on systemic racism in our country and state. Among these major events were the murder of George Floyd, the Black Lives Movement, and COVID-related disparities, including higher infection rates and death in Black communities. The pawnbrokers would have you believe they are under attack, but in fact, the opposite is true. If we fail to close the loophole that allows pawnbrokers to charge 240% APR, at least two things will happen. First, the people who were once vulnerable to payday lenders will become targets of the pawnbrokers. When Ohio put a cap on payday loans, the pawn industry grew 97%. The second thing that would happen is that it would open the floodgates for other predatory lenders who would come to the legislature asking for a carve-out. And who could blame them? Why should a pawnbroker get to charge 240% APR, while an installment lender is limited to 36%? Pawnbrokers want you to think they're different from the payday lenders. But pawnbrokers, like payday lenders, make a living draining money from people who are struggling. Pawn loan interest rates are comparable to payday loan rates. Capping the interest rates on pawn loans at 36% will mean that money currently going into the pawnbrokers' pockets now instead will remain in the customers' or the consumer pockets. Research shows that putting money in consumer pockets is good for the community and local economies. It creates jobs and reduces the need for emergency cash. Here's the bottom line. The PLPA is working. Again, the bottom line, the PLPA is working. The pawnbrokers have been allowed to evade it for over a year and a half. This bill will fulfill the original intent of the PLPA to cover all forms of predatory lending, and we look forward to the support of my legislative colleagues as well as the community of faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Majority Leader Collins. We are joined here today by leaders of the faith community who are required every day to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. And in my case, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, but thank God for them. First, let me bring up a good friend of mine from the Archdiocese of Chicago, Father Larry Dowling. Father?
Thank you very much. Father Larry Dowling, pastor of St. Agatha, St. Martin de Porres Parish on the west side of Chicago. I have witnessed the effects of the predatory lending many, many times in my parish, in my community. People who have approached me to help them pay off these exorbitant loans. And so this is something near and dear to my heart. And in the spirit of Monsignor Egan, who was one of my heroes, I just want to say very clearly that this loophole needs to be closed. There are way too many people taking advantage of the poor already in our society, way too many. And we need to continue to close not only this loophole, but all of those loopholes that continue to criticize basic welfare and not in turn criticize corporate welfare. We need to continue to focus on the tenets of our faith, which call us to fairness and justice and fair treatment. When we talk about violence in our communities, oftentimes we focus on physical violence, but this is a violence that is done to families that can be divisive, can tear families apart, and it is an issue that is near and dear to the heart of the Christian message. Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI has said the vulnerable should be protected from the risk of usury and from despair. And Pope Francis as well has said, when a family has nothing to eat because it has to make payments to those who abuse them through predatory lending, this is not Christian. In fact, it is not human to do so. And so we stand with these religious leaders, we stand with the poor especially, who need this loophole closed. And representing the Archdiocese of Chicago, I call for the state to close this loophole so that indeed we may continue to close all of those loopholes in our systems, in our systemic racism that continue to inflict poverty, violence on the poor, on the bodies and minds and spirits of those in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. And now let me bring up my lifelong friend who I just met a second ago, Reverend Michael Ware, who's from the North Shore Baptist Church.
My friends, it is my honor to stand before you and offer a few words on this matter, because indeed, the pawnbrokers should not be allowed to do 240% interest on anything. It is impacting and affecting not the most needy people in our society, the most needed ones in our community. And as a Baptist pastor, I cannot stand here and not see the injustice that happens when this is allowed to go on. Indeed, when we have laws on the books that are working and that shows that the 36% cap works, why would we not stand and say no more? As a pastor of a church that includes people of several races and ethnicities, including Black, including Hispanic, white, and Korean, I'm in favor of preventing pawn shops from being able to charge predatory interest rates. It is an injustice. Hear me, it's an injustice to see something that is wrong and continue to allow it to happen. I do call upon our legislators to stand up and do something that is right, that is true, especially at this time of year. People may decide to pawn something that they want to get a special gift for a loved one or for a friend. But now realize that unless they pay it off right away, the interest rates will cause them tremendous financial hardships. Why should that be? Many of the people in my church, especially those who have recently immigrated to the U.S. to escape oppression, to escape violence, should not have to pay exorbitant fees and rates just to borrow a few $100s by pawning a precious item in an emergency situation. People living paycheck to paycheck should not be taken advantage of, especially when they are already experiencing economic difficulties. It is immoral. It is unjust. It is unfair. And when we can do something about it as legislators of this great state, this is a call to action, to do what is right. It is illegal, in any other sense of the words, to ignore this and let it go. Senator Collins has already said to us this has been a long battle for her. What a Christmas gift you would offer not only to her, but more importantly, to the citizens of this great state. What a Christmas gift it would be if we would say no more. No more to pawnbrokers having the freedom and the reign to do as ever they choose. It is time to be about justice for all of God's people, not just those who are trying to get rich off the backs of the poor, but so that the poor might have a right to be able to go and enjoy their holiday season. But not only the holiday season, but into this next year. They will not be living under the predatory actions that are happening because we are being inactive. It's time. Stand up for what is right, what is true, more importantly, what is justice.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Reverend Ware, for your eloquent advocacy. Next up is Ms. Leah Greenblum, who is the founder and executive director of Jewish Free Loan Chicago. Leah?
When people apply for loans from pawnbrokers, they are most always in a tough financial spot. Typically, these borrowers aren't seeking loans because their financial status is stable. In fact, they are in need of something urgently, and it's difficult to come by these days. It's capital. According to the Urban Institute, even before the pandemic, in 2019, 61% of Chicago families were financially insecure, with less than $2,000 in savings, compared to 52% nationally. The pandemic has only exacerbated this. Think about it. Of course, financial emergencies can vary, but they often impose a huge burden on everyday individuals. A stolen catalytic converter can cost you over $2,200. A flooded basement can run you over $3,000. And a burst appendix may tally well over $5,000 out of pocket. Inevitably, we all run into financial emergencies at one time or another. That's life. But without things like generational wealth and a robust social network, households can be left with very few options. My faith, including the Torah and Jewish sages like Maimonides, offers direction on how to treat quote, the needy among us and actually support our neighbors. When it comes to lending, we are given guidance on how to do the right thing by entering a partnership. In doing so, we see that there is an alternative to charging high interest rates. Judaism presents a time-honored tradition of doing business, interest-free loans. I founded Jewish Free Loan Chicago this year because my tradition taught me that there was another way. Simply put, JFLC aids and empowers those with financial needs in our community to achieve their goals by offering zero-interest loans. And JFLC provides an alternative for people of all backgrounds so that they don't get stuck in cycles of high-interest loans from pawnbrokers and risk bankruptcy. Here's a little bit about JFLC's loan applicants. They're owners of older vehicles that need new tires so they can get to work safely. They're parents working 3 jobs trying to cover childcare. They're aging neighbors trying to simultaneously pay for diabetes medication along with their mortgage payments and stay afloat. In the end, they all need affordable access to funds. What they don't need is a whopping 240% APR or higher. Now, JFLC just launched this year, and as we get going on getting the word out about our program and building it up, we must also advocate for the end of predatory lending as we know it. Interest-free loans make our community more resilient, one borrower at a time. As we invest in one another, we prove there is another way. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Wow. Thank you so much. There are 3 people that are standing with me, and I want to introduce them. Is Horacio Mendez, who is the president and CEO of the Woodstock Institute. We have Bob Gilligan, who is the executive director for the Catholic Conference of Illinois. And we have Rabbi Seth Limmer. Thank you so much for being here, and they'll be available to answer questions if you have them. There are 2 high-ranking elected officials who want to convey their regrets of not being able to be here, but they have offered statements in support. The first is from Mayor Lori Lightfoot. She says, the exorbitant interest rates charged by pawnbrokers are unjust and exploit financially vulnerable Chicagoans who may have no other option to make ends meet. As mayor, I have made it a priority to crack down on unjust business practices like these, as well as to reform the City of Chicago's fine and fee practices with assistance programs like the Clear Path relief for vehicle stickers, utility building relief for water and sewer bills, and more. I urge leaders in Springfield to implement these interest rate cap for pawnbrokers as another step toward lessening the economic hardships facing our residents. And from Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle, she says, we are all aware that predatory lending can have devastating impact on communities of color. The time to act to close the pawnbroker loophole is now. Always straight and to the point. For over 20 years, we've listened to the same arguments that were once used by the payday lenders that are now being used by the pawnbroker lenders about capping their loans. Y'all gonna put us out of business. Y'all hurting the people y'all trying to help. Who else is gonna help these people? Let the buyer beware. Well, let's be clear. Since we've capped loans at 36%, the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation has granted hundreds of new lending licenses, so lenders are not leaving, they're coming. And as far as the pawnbrokers are concerned, not being able to make money on their loans, look, the average 30-day loan is rolled over an average of 2 times, turning a 30-day loan into a 90-day loan, trapping their borrowers into an endless cycle of debt. And besides, if the customer defaults, the pawnbroker can easily turn the pawn item into collateral as an inventory for a sale. So capping pawnbroker loans at 36% will save consumers millions of dollars in fees. For 80 years, from 1909 to 1991, before the law was passed to eliminate interest caps, all pawnbrokers operated with a cap of 36%. What that means is more money in consumers' pockets, less money in the pawnbrokers' pockets. Bankruptcies will go down, savings will go up. In other words, less debt devastation and more asset accumulation. In this Christmas season, let us join these leaders and others in wishing you glad tidings of great joy to all people, for the joy that comes from family and friends and strangers, not material things. Don't let your Christmas joy become your New Year's nightmare. Thank you so much for being. Anybody have any questions for us? My name is William McNary, but that's always a good question for me. McNary, M-C-N-A-R-Y. I am the co-director of Citizen Action, Illinois. All right, brother. Any other brothers? Where's the sisters, by the way? Any other brothers that have any questions for us? If not, I want to thank Senator Jackie Collins, our champion, for this magnificent Christmas gift. Thank you, both speakers, for your excellent oratory, and thank you for everybody else who will stand to fight with us to pass this thing in January.